this is Jim from JetsonHacks.com. Today we're going to put together a PWM Servo Driver with I2C interface. So these are very useful when you have a group of servos that you want to attach to the Jetson. It runs over the I2C bus. The cool thing about it is that you can drive 16 servos using one board, but you can also gang them together. You can have up to 62 of these boards, which means you can drive 992 servos. That's a lot of servos. But I only need to drive a few of them, and this is much more convenient than actually using the GPIO pins and the PWM service on the Jetson itself. In any case, you're going to have to drive the servos themselves with an external power source, and this board has that capability built in through these little terminal blocks. So let's start assembling. There are let's see, 4 of these 3x4 headers. So let's start soldering up those first. There's 1, 3 more to go. So now we can put on the header block, a little power terminal. Now we're ready to put on the header. So make sure I have it on the right side. 0. So this will plug into the breadboard here. We should be good to go. All right then, let's put our PWM board together here. We put on the terminals so that we could power the servos through another power source, not through the Jetson. So I'm going to put these wires on the terminal block, then wire it to a little jack here. It's important that you wire these correctly. The particular servos that we're using are 6-volt, so this will be driven by 6-volt power by this little wall wart here. Plug that in. And then this goes into the breadboard. So this is our standard I2C wiring. Starting at pin 14, 16, 18, and 20, J3, A1, we have the ground, we have power, and then we have SDA, and then SCL, the clock. And then those are wired over to the PWM board, into the ground, the clock, SDA, and VCC. There is something on here called V+. That's to actually drive the servos if you want to drive it through the little pin here. So next we wire up the servo. So we're just going to use 2 servos. This is a pan and tilt head. Again, these are sensitive to the way that you actually wire them up. They aren't keyed. So this is pin 0, and this is number 1. The white stripe indicates that that's the PWM pulse line. So that's wired up. Plug in the power for the servos. And now we're ready to fire up the Jetson. The little green light comes on. That's a good sign. So over on the Jetson Hacks account on GitHub, we have a driver for the PWM board. We're going to clone that. Switch over that directory. Switch over the example directory. Now before we go any further, we have to set the pulse width of the servos that we're using. So we're going to edit servo example. These are commented out. And it depends on what servos you're using. Most servos are pretty sensitive to these numbers. For the particular ones that we're using, the RGS 13 from Robot Geek, the minimum is 120 and the maximum is, oops. Work with me on this, boy. Minimum is 120 and the maximum is 720. So we're going to save this, close it up. Make. So after it compiles, we should be able to run it and test our little servo here. So you have to run sudo servo example. And it works. So it takes this lower servo, rotates it between 0 and 180 degrees. Then the upper servo goes from 0 to 90 using in the example program.